Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Careers in Cloud Getting Started on Google Cloud webinar. We are so happy to have you. I'm Carrie Brody. I am the manager of the Learning and Certification Hub in the Google Cloud community. And with me, I have our amazing presenter for today. This is Brian Rice. Brian is the head of learning portfolio for Google Cloud. He has been with Google for 5.5 years, and his career is as a technical trainer, and he is a self-proclaimed Linux nerd. So if you have any fun jokes about Linux, please put them in the chat.
Oh no.
Make us laugh.
Watch out.
We love to laugh. And now he leads a team that sets the directions for Cloud's learning content. Before Google, he was at Palo Alto Networks, Amazon Web Services, and VMware. And even before that, in the before times, he was a contractor for Microsoft. So he has a cloud trifecta, which is a pretty big accomplishment. I'm only on a singular. I have a singularity, I suppose.
I think that's a unifecta.
A unifecta. I like that. I'm going to start using that. And we'll get started now. I put this in the chat, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will have a Q&A at the end, so we'll be answering them towards the end. And Brian, I will let you take it away.
Thank you kindly. Well, hey everybody, thank you for joining us. I'm not at home right now. I'm at the beach. This is an Airbnb. If I promise that if I had a surfboard of my very own, I wouldn't put it up on the wall. I'd try to surf on it, and I would fail, of course. But anyway, I just wanted you to. I didn't want anybody to think that that I'm a better interior decorator than I actually am. Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is sort of two topics in one, really. A lot of people are interested in the various kinds of careers that are in cloud, and also a lot of people are interested in broadening their knowledge of the various public clouds that are out there. So we thought we could do two things at once, and share both information that will help people who have started off with another cloud, add skills on Google Cloud. And we will also talk about resources and directions for where people can go from here. So I did want to clarify that another kind of talk that could be titled Moving to Google Cloud is an actual talk about migration. If you're running stuff in other clouds, how do you migrate it into Google Cloud? Well, there's, of course, lots of migration tools. We'll talk about those in the future, but today we're going to focus on topic one, getting your brain into Google Cloud, and topic two, getting your career possibly into the Google Cloud data sphere that's out there. I did want to re-emphasize that although I'll be talking about other clouds, particularly AWS and Azure, this really will be a completely non-competitive talk. I'm not going to say word one about how Google Cloud is cool. For purposes of this discussion here, all of the clouds are cool. And, you know, when you think about it, they are kind of cool. I mean, you can be sitting there in your sweatpants and you know, harness an amazing amount of computing resources and do wild things that were unheard of a decade ago. And I think that's really cool, regardless. So onward and upward. Here's a summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about some features and aspects of Google Cloud that may be different from what you learned coming from other clouds. I'm going to talk about how resource management is different. Infrastructure as code is a very, very important thing, particularly for people who want careers in cloud. And knowing about that landscape is very, very helpful because it'll help you get started in the right direction. And the topic that is nearest and dearest to everyone's hearts, how to avoid surprise bills. That is a very good topic for us because it holds people back. Frankly, I think it's one of the main obstacles to cloud adoption, and all of the clouds face it, namely people's fear that they will accidentally overspend and wind up in a bad situation. So I will be telling you about techniques that you can use to avoid surprise bills later on down the line. Let's dive in. Say that you are just getting started with Google Cloud. I mean, literally just getting started. You go to you go to the Google Cloud console, which is at the clever URL, um, console.cloud.google.com, and you'll be presented with this. Hey, this is a different thing right here. Uh, for those of you who have worked in AWS, you will know that the prompt looks a little different. It says, um, sign in using the root login of your Google Cloud login, or I'm paraphrasing here, or one of the logins that's in your AWS account. Um, that's different. In Google Cloud, identity is completely separate from Google Cloud itself. There's a separate plane of identities. What you're going to want to log in as the very first time that you hop in is going to be just a Gmail address or any kind of Gmail or any kind of other Google identity. So, for example, if your organization has Google Workspace, the identities in your Google Workspace domain will also work here. So the bottom line here is that in AWS, identities and accounts of people are a part of an AWS account. That is not true for Google Cloud. Instead, the identities are managed separately from the contents of your cloud resources. By the way, AWS is the one that's unusual here. Google Cloud and Azure are kind of like each other in this regard. For Azure, the identity plane is Microsoft logins. So when I log into Azure, I log in as my blah blah at live.com login. So that's a good thing to know right off the bat. Now, identity and access management is a very important topic for two reasons. One, you don't want other people messing with your stuff. Um, and in particular, you. Now, I myself, as Carrie mentioned, I've been a Unix nerd for a really long time, and that means that I have been logged in as a privileged user and screwed stuff up. Uh, this is why it's a really great idea to do your casual day-to-day work in an environment that has not elevated privilege. Now, in order to do that, you have to understand how identity and access management work. Again, all three of those clouds that I mentioned have a system for giving permissions, saying who can do what to what. And if you've worked with this in AWS before, you will have noticed that it's a very expressive, rather complex language that's expressed using a JSON document, and it specifies in the policy document itself who can do what to what. Uh, in Google Cloud, it's much simpler. The who's are defined separately from the can do what's to what. So let's say, for example, that you have built a virtual machine and you want to say who has the power to work with it, to destroy it, to edit it. So there will be a role which contains certain permissions, like, for example, editor. Editor is a role that lets somebody make changes to something. And so you can give your friend, Jane, that role on that virtual machine. So Jane can now edit that virtual machine. Now, I said your friends, and that's really important. One key career tip to slightly get ahead of myself is work with your friends, collaborate with people. One nice thing about Google Cloud is that it's easy to bring people in and work together with them on a project in Google Cloud. See that on the left side, that the little blue icon with the group of people in there? Well, that's a Google group. Yes, I mean the same kind of Google groups that you used to organize the block party 2 weeks ago. That is something that can have privileges associated with it in Google Cloud. So if you're collaborating with 3 or 4 friends on something cool that you're building in Google Cloud, you can give permissions to the group that consists of you. And then if one of you, say, gets bitten by a zombie, you can take that person out of the Google group and they lose their permissions. Now, What I'm doing right now is just a very, very simple, high level explanation of IAM in Google Cloud. There's a lot more that you can learn about it. But although I'm not going to go into detail, it's a really, really important topic because you want to make sure that you have control over who can do what. This is particularly so for people who want to go on to careers in cloud. As an individual hobbyist, you might not care too much. However, the minute you start collaborating with other people, such as in a company or in a startup or in a project, then suddenly understanding IAM really well becomes very valuable. So, forewarned is forearmed. Now, I want to tell you about Google Cloud Projects. This is an abstraction that AWS does not have, that Google Cloud has. It is inside of an account, and you can associate whatever resources that you want. Um, and typically, you use a Google Cloud project to draw a circle around the stuff you're using to do a particular project. So, like for example, take a look at the right side of the screen. That's a screenshot of my Google Cloud console login when I go to the Select a Project menu. Each one of those projects is a different bundle of resources, and they are all gathered together. Here's the cool thing. Suppose that I want to get rid of one. I want to get rid of all of the junk that I have assembled as part of, say, working on a blog or working on a speech to text system. All I have to do is delete the project and the billing ceases. Yes, I said it. I said the B word, billing. That's I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of people are nervous about accidentally running up a big bill. So, organizing projects that refer to stuff you're working on is a great way to assert a mechanism of control. Another important thing about projects, by the way, is that they're where billing resides. Billing in Google Cloud is done at the project level. So that means, for example, say you're working with your friends again, you guys could agree that you will pay for those resources that are associated with the speech to text project, and Jane will pay for the resources that will be associated with the blog, and different credit cards for each one. That is mighty helpful to be able to manage billing accounts at a fine grained level. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning that infrastructure as code is very, very important, particularly for people who are looking at careers in the cloud. And when I say cloud, I mean all of the public clouds. They all have systems for infrastructure as code. So that means not building stuff by hand, not setting up virtual machines and networks and functions manually. Instead, having that infrastructure deployed in one fell swoop. Now, in the olden days, we would write shell scripts or to date myself, Perl scripts. However, the modern way to do infrastructure as code is in a declarative way, where you write a description of what you want the infrastructure in your account to look like, and then there's an engine that goes out there and makes it so. Now, for example, in AWS, there's a system called CloudFormation. And once again, it is, a CloudFormation template is a big, complicated document that is structured using JSON. And you can learn all about CloudFormation, but CloudFormation is unique to AWS. Now, in Google Cloud, you have two choices, and they both happen to be open source. And you should choose whichever of these is more aligned with your interests. So, for example, suppose you're already working with containers and orchestrating containers at scale. And whenever you say that, you think Kubernetes. A lot of people on Google Cloud use Google Kubernetes Engine because it's really easy. Um, it makes a lot of things really simple by automating them away. Anyway, one nice thing about Google Cloud is that you can use the Kubernetes resource model to control resources that aren't Kubernetes. and you don't have to learn a new paradigm, and that's pretty cool. If you're not one of those people, though, then Terraform is for you. Terraform is an open source project. It was open sourced by its creator, HashiCorp. Google Cloud has contributed to open source Terraform a whole bunch of connectors to administer Google Cloud resources using Terraform. One thing I really love about Terraform, well, I like a lot of things about Terraform, but Terraform templates are nice and readable, and they can also be very easily cross cloud as well. Anyway, this is a skill that, in my opinion, a lot of people don't invest mental resources in early enough. Um, Infrastructure as code and declarative descriptions of what you want your infrastructure to look like is a really great habit to get into, because you can keep those environment definitions that you write out in a source control system. You can keep them in GitHub right there next to the code that you're building. And so if you need to, you can trash it and build it again. Um, that is the future. That is the way people work in 2022. So I encourage everybody to spend a little bit of time gaining skills in one of these infrastructure as code environments. One more quick thing before I go ahead. If you read the Google Cloud documentation, you will see references to a third infrastructure as code system called Deployment Manager. Google Cloud is recommending today that everybody who is just now getting started with infrastructure as code should use either the Kubernetes model or the Terraform model. Um, Deployment Manager came before those on Google Cloud, and it is being maintained for the benefit of people who got started with Deployment Manager already, to make sure that we don't leave them in the lurch. Okay, now for the topic that everybody gets scared about: how not to spend too much money. This is important because whenever you get a brand new account, a brand new Google Cloud account gets $300 worth of free spend. Now, of course, that means that when you run out of that $300, then billing starts to the credit card that you associated with the project. Now, Google Cloud provides a lot of different tools to help you not exceed that limit. One of them is price estimates. A lot of the systems that are exposed in the Google Cloud Console will give you a price estimate for the thing that it's about to do before you do it. For example, if you spin up a virtual machine, if you spin up a basic virtual machine, you'll see a little price estimate. Hey, this is going to be about $20 a month. If you configure a huge honking virtual machine with tons of CPUs and tons of memory, then it'll look really expensive, and you can click the no button, and you won't spend any money. For example, another example is BigQuery. BigQuery is Google Cloud's data warehouse system, which people can use to get insights from data using generic SQL queries. And again, when you write a query in Google BigQuery, it tells you how much data this query is going to process before you launch it. And again, you can use that to make sure that you're spending your money wisely. Another important thing is to know what you've built. This is yet another reason why projects are your friend. Uh, if you if you're just getting started, chances are you're going to try out a lot of stuff. And if you just do it all in one project, it's not going to be easy to find anything. But if you make different projects and organize them according to their subjects, then it'll be easier to understand the intents behind the various things that you spun up. Now, there's a system called billing alerts, where you can arrange to get any of various kinds of alerts when you get a certain spend threshold. Now, I need to caution you, this is not real time. As far as I know, none of the cloud providers provide real-time billing alerts. Real-time systems are really difficult to build, and they require a lot of they take a lot of engineering effort. So that means that a billing alert is not guaranteed to be up to the minute. Frankly, though, most of the components of a cloud platform, and Google Cloud is no exception, it's really rather hard to suddenly rack up a big bill. The one exception is functions. Um, Google Cloud has Google Cloud Functions. AWS has Lambda. Azure has um, Azure has Azure Functions. Now, because these functions as a service environment bill by the function invocation, what do you think happens if your function happens to be recursive? Oops, that is one of the ways in which you can run up a bill. Now, it still takes a while. Um, so, the cost for each function invocation is a fraction of a cent, but nevertheless, you're running on fast computers, so it can add up. My suggestion is get really comfortable with other parts of Google Cloud, including the billing alert system, and then start thinking about Cloud Functions. Or if you want to just keep things simple, learn about Cloud Run. Cloud Run is a modern platform as a service from Google Cloud, um, and it has the nice feature of managing deployment as well as simply launching functions. So it's quite popular, and that's well worth taking a look at. Okay, onward and upward. So how can you learn more about Google Cloud without spending a lot of money? Well, um, I mentioned that each new cloud user gets a $300 credit, and I bet you that you would like to learn more about Google Cloud without having to spend down that $300. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a sandbox where you could try stuff out, say with instructions so that you know what you're doing, and it doesn't count against your $300? And maybe it could even be free. Well, there is such a thing. Google Cloud Skills Boost, and we'll put a link to it in the comments, is Google Cloud's environment for delivering all kinds of training content on there's videos, there's hands-on labs, there's quizzes, there are skill badges that you can earn. There are individual point hands-on labs on particular technologies that you can do, hundreds and hundreds of labs. And the cool thing is that you do each lab in a sandbox. So that means that it's in a separate Google Cloud project from where you're doing your stuff. So there's no risk of you messing up the stuff that you're working on or burning down your $300 or incurring billing. So the URL again will be in the notes. It's very simple. Cloudskillsboost.google. Yes, it's in the .google top level domain. Uh, Create an account, sign in, and for most people, it'll say you're eligible for a trial. Um, Now, that trial lasts for 30 days, and you can use all of the resources that are there. So, what resources should you start with? I have some suggestions. I think everybody who comes from AWS or Azure would benefit from going through the short courses Google Cloud for AWS Pros and Google Cloud for Azure Pros. They're a lot like an expanded version of this talk, where the talk and the lab exercises explain the cloud platform that we have here in Google Cloud and compare and contrast it to things that you've worked with before, once again, in a very non-competitive environment. Now, cloud engineering is one of those career categories that a lot of people are interested in. If that happens to be yours, then moving on to certifications is a great idea. Uh, Google Cloud offers Associate Cloud Engineer and also Professional Cloud Architect. These are professional certifications that take a long time to prep for, but are very valuable and well recognized once you get them. Now, there's also a whole bunch of people who can hear me, I'm sure, who are becoming or are already developers, people who are writing applications. Well, I'll include once again in the links a link to a course on Google Cloud Skills Boost, which is all about the developer experience on Google Cloud and trying out those tools. There are two of them that I wanted to call your attention to in particular. Cloud Code it's a set of plugins for popular IDEs, and when I say popular IDEs, the one that I use all the time is Visual Studio Code. So it's a set of plugins for VS Code and others that let you control cloud resources from right there inside of VS Code. I love VS Code myself. And it's really convenient to have it right there, right next to my GitHub repo and all that good stuff. There's also Firestore. Firestore is a really simple, easy to use, low cost NoSQL database. A lot of people who build simple applications start off with Firestore because it's really easy to use. Cloud Code and Firestore are both covered in that developing applications course that there will be a link to in the comments. Finally, a lot of people these days are interested in the data science landscape. You want to learn how to get meaning and value from data at scale. You want to be able to make predictions. Well, there's lots of really interesting technologies that you can learn all about on Google Cloud Skills Boost, like Looker and BigQuery, which I mentioned earlier. Vertex AI is Google Cloud's umbrella term for all of its various machine learning resources, which range in scale from using simple pre-tuned models to building your own models. Once again, you can learn about all of these things with hands-on labs at no charge using Google Cloud Skills Boost for the first 30 days. For a lot of these, you can completely bomb through them in the first 30 days, and you haven't even touched your free tier credit. And that's a win. So that's all I had prepared. In addition to these two beautiful URLs here, console.cloud.google.com, which is the console, and cloudskillsboost.google, which is where you go to learn stuff and do lab activities in the sandbox. We'll have other links for you as well. And that is all I prepared for today. And I believe we have some time for questions.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, Brian. Alrighty, we have some questions already from the chat, but if you haven't asked a question yet and you have one, please feel free to post a comment, put it in the chat, and we will be able to get to it. The first question we had, which I answered briefly, but I think we can get a little bit deeper, is when will the next Google Cloud Learn to Earn campaign be held? For those of you who don't know, Learn to Earn is a challenge that we occasionally do in the Google Cloud community. And we do not currently have one planned for a specific date, but I did put a link in there where you can always subscribe to our updates. We do currently have an ACE Study Buddy challenge happening. So for Associate Cloud Engineer, but I know that one of the big draws is that you can get free access to labs and Google Cloud courses. And
And
Brian,
swag.
and swag and swag. But Brian, it sounds like there are other ways without having a campaign to get free access to certain labs and Google Cloud courses. Keep me
Yes,
honest. Is
that is
that right?
correct. With the free trial, the 30-day free trial that is available through Google Cloud Skills Boost right now,
Wonderful.
and it's only for new accounts.
Only for new accounts. It's good to know. And we have another question, which is something that I think a lot of people have this question is, should I be so deep in programming to work in cloud computing? And I guess I have a follow-up question for that personally, which is, yeah, how much knowledge do I have to get started in cloud computing?
Well, to get started, very little. I should clarify that programming is just one thing you can do with a computer. When people say programming, typically what they mean is giving a computer a list of instructions and saying, go do these. Like famously, Python is a programming language, which consists of giving a computer a bunch of instructions. Now, there are some fields in cloud computing where it's really kind of critical to have programming skills, not superhuman skills, but they're kind of the lingua franca of the domain. So I'm sure that a lot of people listening to my voice and your voice, Carrie, are interested in data science. So if you are one of those people, you should really learn Python. And you should also really learn SQL, which is the structured query language, not the same kind of language, but a way to express queries that you make against a huge database. So those are two key programming skills that people who are doing data science really need. However, the landscape for other roles is quite different. So, for example, you can become a cloud architect without knowing a programming language such as Python, or shell scripting, or PowerShell scripting, or what have you. Um, Now, I do recommend that people who are becoming cloud architects learn the declarative languages, such as Terraform or the language of Kubernetes. These are computer languages too, except they're not like a recipe. They're not a list of steps. They're basically a description of the world, and you say, "Hey, computer, make the world like this description that I have given you." That is a very important skill for people who seek to become a cloud architect and get a good job. That is what future proofs you in that particular field. Um, and and finally, if you want to develop applications, believe it or not, there are even environments that are no code environment for developing applications. Google Cloud has one called AppSheet, which lets people build real, actual workaday applications without knowing how to code, using the tools that Google Workspace provides. Looker is the same way. Looker provides a way for people to build applications that use the data that is unearthed by Looker to solve day-to-day problems. So those are two ways that people can develop applications without a heavy programming background.
Thank you. That is wonderful information. And Brian, if people want to get started learning SQL or Python, do you have any resources that you like for those
Um,
particularly?
for well, there's because these are not Google Cloud
Yeah.
technologies. There's
Yeah.
lots and lots of resources available. For Python, I want to point people to Kaggle. I don't know if you've heard of Kaggle. Kaggle is an organization that runs machine learning challenges, and they're very famous. People who win a Kaggle competition by coming up with the best machine learning model to predict XYZ. That's definitely, red letter on your resume type things. But Kaggle also has a lot of resources for people who are just getting started, and I'm plugging them because they're a part of Google. If you go to Kaggle.com, there's a Python course that is free and right there. And there's also some training materials on the specific tools in Python that data scientists use all the time. So that is a great resource there. Now, you also asked about SQL. Um, I don't think I have a particular one to recommend today. We are aware that not knowing SQL is a getting started barrier for a lot of people, and so the scientists are on the case.
I love that. Yeah. I know I have just looked up Learn SQL for free online and just done a little bit of perusing to see which website that pops up best suits my own personal learning style. That's my tactic. um, oh, we do have another question. Where can I see the best opportunities for hands-on GCP architecting skills after learning and certified if I don't have access to GCP Architect in current working environment?
Sure. Well, let's say that you have gone through and built. You've gone through the training. You've gone through the certification. Where do you go next if your current job or work doesn't include GCP architecture? Well, as for me, I like to build stuff. It, you know, I write code for fun because that's the kind of person I am. Some people might be on one of those. Me, I'm in Python. But developing a fun system is a great way to learn. And our colleague Carrie and I have a colleague named Forrest Brazil. He is a very famous Twitter personality, and he runs something called the Cloud Resume Challenge. If you do a search for Cloud Resume Challenge, you'll find it. And it is you can do this challenge on any one of the cloud platforms, including Google Cloud. And he works for Google now, so we're rather proud of this. And it's a sequence of activities that you do in Google Cloud, which culminate in a resume site for yourself that exemplifies Google Cloud best practices. So it's a great experience, and at the very end, you have an amazing calling card to find more opportunities to excel. So, Cloud Resume Challenge.
And I believe I just put Forrest's Twitter profile link in the chat.
Yeah.
And also, I believe that if you do hashtag Cloud Resume Challenge on Twitter, it will also come up.
Forrest also sings. He's got some really slapping tunes that are linked to on Twitter as well. So check that out.
Amazing. I love finding out our colleagues' hidden talents. It always makes me so happy.
I'm not sure that this one is hidden.
Is that hidden? Yeah,
Forrest's space, since he's kind of on YouTube doing his talent. Let's see here. Anything else? Are there any other questions that we should answer for people?
I don't see any other questions that any other questions. I think that speaks volumes to your ability to cover all the whole topic very thoroughly, Brian. Thank you.
Well, that's what they pay me for.
It's true. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And I also want to thank everybody who joined us today. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you did too.
And if you need to come back and rewatch this because you forgot something, well, if you're watching it right now, you know that it's going to be available after we end the stream.
Indeed.
All right.
Y'all take care now.
Have a wonderful Wednesday.
Bye-bye.